Welcome to the Pipeliners Podcast, episode 448, sponsored by FlowState, providers of pipeline leak detection software built to remove barriers and empower operators. FlowState helps teams detect anomalies, reduce false alarms, and improve response with practical tools designed for diverse pipeline operations. Learn more at flowstatesolutions.ai.
The Pipeliners Podcast, where professionals, Bubba geeks, and industry insiders share their knowledge and experience about technology, projects, and pipeline operations. And now your host, Russel Treat.
Thanks for listening to the Pipeliners Podcast. I appreciate you taking the time, and to show that appreciation, we give away a customized Yeti tumbler to one listener every episode. This week, our winner is Christopher Abshire. Congratulations, Christopher. Your Yeti's on its way. To learn how you can win this prize, stick around till the end of the episode. This week, we speak with Mark LaCour, keynote speaker at the recent API Pipeline Conference, who spoke about the state of our industry.
Mark, welcome to the Pipeliners Podcast. You are our first victim for our new 3-camera setup in the new Pipeliners Podcast booth at API Pipeline Conference. So awesome that you should go hang with the Pipeliners for a while.
Absolutely, I'm gonna hang with the Pipeliners. And actually, other than me stepping on the cable, it's a pretty cool setup. It's we've known each other for a long time, Russell. It's not like we first met.
You're one of the reasons I actually started the podcast. We should tell that story. I don't know if I've ever told that story with you here.
Let's do it.
So in 2016, 2017, I had a whole group of people telling me I needed to start a podcast. And I started, as you do, you start having that conversation. Well, what would you think about doing a podcast and what should it look like? And I got your name and I called you up cold out of the blue and said, hey man, I want to get together and talk to you about what would I need to do to start a podcast. And you very graciously said, yeah, come on. And we got together. I think we got together for coffee and sat and had a long conversation. You're like, do this, don't do that. Think about this. It was awesome. And 6 months later, we had a podcast, and here we are 440 plus episodes later.
Yeah. Well, your success is the hard work of you and your team, not me. However, I love the fact that we had that initial conversation. I love to support any other podcasters in our industry. I don't see anybody as competition. We're all family, right? So we're all struggling with the same stuff. And after talking to you for about 30 seconds, I realized you're from the industry. Like, you know what you're talking about.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that, as do you. So what brought you to the API Pipeline and Cybernetics Conference? Why are you here?
I'm here to deliver the keynote. And what brought me here is API reached out to me and said, hey, would you like to be our keynote speaker? Now, between that and me actually being here, there was a whole bunch of negotiations and back and forth and everything else. But there's a bigger picture thing going on here. I've been a member of API for probably 30 years. Mm-hmm. They represent the interest of the oil and gas industry to Congress. It's one of the biggest lobby groups in the U.S., but they also set the standards, if your audience doesn't know this, in almost everything out there. If you go somewhere where there's oil and gas operations and you wash your hands in the bathroom, that soap probably meant some API spec, right? Now, API, I thought for a while, lost their way. They got too caught up in the big commercial aspects of a large political organization. The negative publicity that our industry was getting needed to be addressed, and I didn't think they were addressing it well. They were putting a lot of money in big production, think Super Bowl ads, and it just pissed me off, Russell. And so I got more involved with API to try help them understand that they needed to do more grassroots sort of stuff, and that our industry, this negative public perception, would not go away on its own. And I had nothing to do with them changing their ways, but over the years, they saw the same problem and they changed their ways.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons that we've had a long-term relationship. They were our first sponsor. They've been a sponsor every year since the first year they sponsored, and we work with them as they release new pipeline standards, and we get the folks that wrote those standards on the podcast and go through all the details, because I don't know if you've ever read a pipeline standard or any API standard. If you didn't have context, you might not know what it said.
Yep, 100%. And it's people like you and other people that are working with the API that help them realize that they could do more and they could do better. And the cool thing is now API has a lot of bright young people working for them. When I first met them, it was a bunch of old guys like me, right?
Right.
Yeah. And they're doing a great job educating the public. And so I'm here, besides delivering the keynote, I'm here to help further advance the good stuff they are doing. API is important to our industry. It's very important to the pipeline industry. And for an industry that tends to be conservative and not understood in the public, I want to help get the real stories out there, like what that we really do. For instance, the safest way to ship anything, not just oil and gas, think sewage, fresh water, palm oil, is in a pipeline. The world doesn't know that. Let's get those stories out there, which is what you're doing.
Well, I don't know how to really do that. I mean, what I call the Pipeliners podcast education through conversation. We're really trying to collect content that pipeliners themselves would be specifically interested in. And now we've done some interesting stuff. We've had some great folks on. We had the folks with Energy Switch on, and we talked about some of their initiatives. And we've had Next Stop on. Are you familiar with Next Stop? By the way,
very much. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've had Next Stop on. We've talked about what they're doing, but in general, we're more about educating pipeliners about policy, about procedure, about technology, about work practices, and so forth. So a little different. I mean, how many podcasts do you have now in the Oil and Gas Global Network?
You know the answer is because
I
we're
know, I
turning
just
the
asked
microphone
you, but
on.
we're going to record it now
So
for
we
posterity.
have 30 shows as of today, I think, focused on the oil and gas industry. We launched our first one outside of oil and gas on mining, right? And we have, I think, 4 more planned for this year. So we're going to be 36, 37 podcasts by the end of this year.
Yeah, so here's the thing that's interesting. So you're talking about API and API standards, and API handles the whole value chain of oil and gas, from production through transportation, processing, refining, just the whole value chain. And you're covering 30 different aspects within your Oil and Gas Global Network.
Yep.
And you're not covering them all yet because you're adding 4 or 5 more. So that just tells you how complicated and diverse our business actually is, right?
Yeah, and our industry is extremely complex. It does amazing things. I'll put an oil and gas subsea engineer against a NASA scientist any day of the week.
Yeah. I've worked with NASA scientists. I actually sold into NASA. They don't hope. There are some guys there that are really sharp, but they're 1 in 100. It's not it's the other way around. You got 1 bad one in 100 in oil and gas. The level of technology that we use and what we do is every bit as complex, every bit as cutting edge, and frankly, every bit as interesting.
It's even more interesting, and the public doesn't know that. So we're sharing those stories. And the reason we have so many different podcasts is we niche them on purpose. So everybody that's interested in oil and gas leadership, we have a show just for that.
Right.
Everybody that's interested in oil and gas upstream operations, we have a show just for that. Everybody that's interested in oil and gas technology, we have a show just for that.
Yeah, so I think Mark's trying to do a throwdown right here. I think he's trying to say, Russell, you should be doing an integrity management podcast. You should be doing a cathodic protection podcast. You should be doing a pipeline measurement podcast. I don't have that kind of energy, Mark. I appreciate the throwdown, but I think we'll just stick with what we're doing.
Russell, you do a great job. I wouldn't change a thing, and I'm not throwing anything down.
Oh, I'm funning with it.
I know you're messing with me. Is your podcast explicit? In Apple, is it marked as explicit or no?
No.
Okay, so I was going to use another word there, but I won't.
Okay, yeah, no, no. So let's talk a little bit. So you and I sat in, and you facilitated a session with an executive management session, kind of a talking session about some of the issues that are up and are big, and you're going to be doing the keynote. So I'd like to kind of cover some of the things you think are key and important. What are we addressing in the pipeline space right now?
Well, from my keynote point of view, there's a couple of things I want to bring up front. First thing is we have this chance, and in my lifetime, I've never seen this opportunity happen before, where this next generation, Generation Alpha, the kids that are still in school right now, they see us in a positive light, whereas the generation before that didn't.
So us, you mean the energy business?
The oil and gas industry. Let's be very specific.
Yeah.
Other parts of the energy vertical, they already see in a positive light. Actually, the funny thing about that is some of those, they actually don't, because that Generation Alpha understands the return on investment. And so some of the other energy sources haven't had a good return on investment because of government intervention.
So how do you know this? Factually?
So before I started Oil and Gas Global Network, I had my company was called ModalPoint. It's a market research company focused on the oil and gas industry. So we've done market research in the industry for almost 20 years. And right after the BP Macondo disaster, we started doing market research by generation, measuring negative public perception. Now, for all your statisticians out there, don't give me grief. We're not covering the entire world. It's only here in Europe. Our sample size is only 5,000 people. So statistically, when I have exact numbers, you could argue with me whether those numbers are right, but the trends are 100% accurate. And the trend we're seeing right now with Generation Alpha is their negative public perception is declining dramatically. They see see us as a cool place to work. Part of that is because it's different than what their parents believe, right? And every kid, when they go through their teenage years, tends to rebel against.
Yeah, not me. I was
right.
No,
we have too many conversations about cars.
I grew up in the 70s, so, if you've ever seen that 70s show, that was pretty much me and my cousins hanging around. That's kind of how it went. It's kind of how it rolled.
So part of it is that they're rebelling a little bit against their parents because their parents are anti-oil and gas. The other thing is you can't fool these kids. They fact check everything.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing. When you look at demographics, I think one of the things that's really interesting, these kids that are in high school have grown up saturated in social media.
Yes.
And their whole relationship with social media is something very, very different than folks of our generation.
We can't understand their relationship to it. We can articulate it, we can see it, but we truly don't understand it. If you have kids that age, they're in high school and they have a Facebook account, that's for mom and dad. That's fake. It's not fake. It's really your kid, but they know mom and dad is checking up on it. So they put the information up there that they want mom and dad to see. Sorry, it's this generation. That's how smart they are.
Right.
Yeah. So they fact check everything. They know how to fact check. They're also slightly greedy, which sounds negative, but it's really a positive. They also care about the planet and local communities.
Well, our republic was built on educated self-interest.
Yes. And so this Generation Alpha still wants to save the planet. However, they want to make enough money to make a good living so then they can donate time and money to worldly causes. So they're not going to go to school and getting $300,000 worth of debt to get a degree in basket weaving. That's not their mojo, right? And they see our industry as cool. You get to travel. It's the most well-paying industry
it's interesting, right? I mean, I think it's really important for people from our business to understand that things they are changing. I mean, part of it is what's just going on politically and geopolitically. And, our podcast, not really a political podcast. I know you try to avoid it. Of course, you can't really talk oil and gas and not talk a little bit about politics because it impacts so many things that we do. Awesome. So that's one thing we want to know is that perceptions are changing in the younger generations.
Right.
Okay. So what else?
The next thing is the world at large needs more and more energy. And we've had a succession of events that actually, unfortunately, weren't great for the planet. So we had COVID to begin with, and we all remember when oil and gas went negative, and then the energy constraints started to happen. And people start to notice the energy constraints because prices of things started going up. Not just gasoline and diesel, the food that you buy, your Amazon delivery.
Yeah.
If you order DoorDash, have you noticed since the pandemic how much your DoorDash feeds went up? It's because their costs of getting their people to move your
fast food has probably doubled.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and what the future is going to bring. The future 100 years out is very bright, but we have to get there, right? The other thing I'm talking about is literally the physics and chemistry of hydrocarbons. I'm not going to go too deep in it because it bores people, right?
We wouldn't bore this audience. We're geeks. We like that stuff.
You would be surprised at how many educated people think that hydrocarbons, oil and gas, come from dead dinosaurs. It's still
we were taught that in the 70s. I was in the textbooks.
Yeah.
Right? It's just patently untrue.
100% untrue.
Oil and gas comes from things that are happening in the geologic formations, given the pressures and the temperatures and what's happening. The planet is continually making more of that product.
Yep. So quick version, hydrocarbons actually come from photosynthesis. You remember this from 8th grade. I don't want to get too deep here, and actually maybe I won't, but in the oceans, plankton and zooplankton photosynthesize. So they basically take carbon dioxide, water, and they convert that using sunlight into energy and oxygen, right? We remember that in 8th grade.
Right.
That energy they create to live is a sugar. It's a glucose or sucrose or fructose. That sugar is made of a hydrogen atom, an oxygen atom, and a carbon atom. When those plants die, that zooplankton and plankton die in the ocean, they sink to the ocean floor in the right environment. They don't rot. They don't decompose. They get covered layers of sediment. Heat and pressure over time remove that oxygen atom, and you're left with a carbon and a hydrogen atom, which is a hydrocarbon. Yeah. So and you're right. The hydrocarbons are still being made in our world's ocean as our planet warms up naturally.
If you go back to World War II and you look at what some of the German science was working on, they were making most of their fuel late in the war from rock.
Yeah. Well, here's Porsche. I love you. Porsche has spent a couple $1 billion inventing a way to use sunlight, water, and air to produce an artificial fuel, gasoline fuel, because at some point a few years ago, Porsche thought that internal combustion engines could disappear and they would become collector's items and you would not be able to buy gasoline. So Porsche's figured a way to make gasoline from the same way that's made naturally. Sorry, Porsche.
That's why you have to spend so much money to buy a Porsche.
Maybe so. Well, Porsche and all the automobile manufacturers have learned rather quickly that world's not happening. That's a subject for a different podcast.
Oh, yeah. We could go way down the rabbit hole on that.
The other thing I'm going to tie in is what happens if we don't make changes in our industry? What happens if we allow politics to continue to dictate energy policy? It's not a good mix. We need to disconnect energy from politics. Now, whether we can do it or not,
I don't
story.
think that's possible. But I think we can change the narrative. We can change the conversation, and that's more of the. I'll be interested to see what you say in your keynote, but I fundamentally believe that we cannot divorce politics from energy. You just
Probably
can't,
not.
because we as people, as communities, as society, we're too dependent on it. It's too important. It impacts too many things. Politicians are going to get involved with it, period.
And you know, Russell, up until recently, I would have disagreed with you because I would point at the Federal Reserve, which intentionally was disconnected from politics. And now it's been connected to politics. So to your point,
you might be able to do it for a season, but you're not going to do it permanently.
But let me tell you what's exciting.
But you can change the narrative.
Yes.
So let's talk about that.
That's in order to change the narrative, we need to quit with this large PR, corporate marketing, us telling you what the facts are. We need to do it the opposite way. We need to go to grassroots, use a lot of social media, take questions, and we educate by having conversations and telling stories. Our industry is horrible at telling stories. Think of any movie or even a commercial that you remember. The commercial trying to sell you something is not what you remember. You remember the story.
Well, just look at what's going on with the show Landman, right?
Yeah.
That people that are in the oil and gas business will look at Landman and they will say, that's not necessarily accurate, but it's accurate enough. And there's some great monologues that are shifting narratives in a way that we could never do if it wasn't on what is it, on Netflix or Paramount? I don't know.
It's Netflix. And so I give credit to API. They sponsored that show. And I have the data to show that the people in the US and Europe that watch that show, the young people, Generation Alpha, it changed their minds enough to go fact check it. And you're right, it's not technically perfect, but if you work in an industry, quit giving that show grief. It's the first show I've ever seen that shows us in a somewhat positive way.
I freaking love it. And when you go back to my young days in the oil patch and working in Midland, Odessa, and going up there and, working 4 days in a row, 16 hours a day, and then getting a day off, and it being a little wild and crazy. That's kind of the way I remember it. I'm just saying.
Russell, I was in Midland, Odessa last month. It's still that way if you're in the right crowd. But let me tell you what's crazy, the way I'm going to end my keynote. I'm going to tie all of that into the future of humanity entering space. Because at some point, our sun will run out of hydrogen. It will go red giant, and this Earth will be burned to a crisp. And no matter what type of technology you have, we can't prevent that. So the only way that our species can survive is getting off this planet. Now, we're talking about millions of years in the future, but I'm going to tie in how this industry is the only way mankind can get into space and survive.
Well, that's fascinating. And I think if you look at what Elon's doing and what Elon's done down in Brownsville and Harlingen and all that, building his whole space compound, he's got his own gas gathering. He's got his own gas processing. He's launching those rockets with methane. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to have hope and excitement about the future of our business.
100%, not just our business, but our species, our impact to the planet, our cultures. There's a lot of bright in the future, but if you pay attention to the news, you won't see all that. So I'm going to try to error correct that a little bit.
There you go. Well, that's what we need, man. Well, look, thank you so much for coming by, and thank you for being the newest well, I won't say that again. I'll say it a different way. Thank you for being the first person to be in our 1, 2, 3 camera setup at the Pipeliners podcast here at the API Pipeline Conference.
Yep. And let me tell you something else. Our audiences love when you bring me on your show and we talk about what we predicted for the year, what we got right, what we got wrong. So thank you to your audiences because we get that feedback all the time. So I love coming on and doing that with you.
Well, we're going to continue it, and we'll be checking in January, see how we did for 26. There's a few things that have happened that I wouldn't have predicted.
Yeah, me neither.
Like what's going on in the Middle East, but I don't want to talk about that right now.
Yeah, no, me neither. But yeah, I knew the possibility was there, but I didn't see
Well,
that
the possibility's always been there. But anyways, well, look, thanks for joining us.
Russell's
So good
been
to
great.
see you. And look, thanks for all the help and support you've given us over the years to be able to do this.
And Russell, thank you for all the help and support you've given us. When I need to know something about the pipeline industry, you're my first number I call. Hey, Russell, what the hell is a
Yes,
pig?
I listen. I listen to oil and gas this week, and occasionally I have to call up and say, "Mark,
I got something wrong.
I need to correct you. I need to correct you on that." Anyways, great. It was good to see you, man. Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Pipeliners Podcast and our conversation with Mark. Just a reminder before you go, you should register to win our customized Pipeliners Podcast Yeti tumbler. Simply visit pipelinepodcastnetwork.com/win and enter yourself in the drawing. If you have ideas, questions, or topics you'd be interested in, or if you'd like to be a guest, please let me know on the Contact Us page at pipelinepodcastnetwork.com or reach out to me on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you next week.